All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're diving into one of the most epic stories ever told, the story of Moses in Surah Al-Qasas.
Chapter 28 of the Quran.
Right. And I gotta say, this one's got it all. Ancient prophecies, a mother's desperate choice, a baby floating down the Nile.
Oh yeah, twists and turns galore.
But also, some really powerful stuff about faith and justice, the struggle against oppression, timeless themes.
It really is. And that's actually what makes Surah Al-Qasas so fascinating. It's not just a historical account.
Right.
It uses the story of Moses to teach us profound spiritual and ethical lessons.
That are relevant to everyone, right? Even today.
Exactly, even today.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Where does this epic tale begin?
Well, the Surah starts with intense drama right off the bat. Imagine Pharaoh, this all-powerful ruler of Egypt. He's at the height of his power.
Okay.
But then there's this prophecy. It foretells that a Hebrew child will cause his downfall.
Oh. So
Pharaoh, being Pharaoh, he issues a brutal decree. Every newborn Hebrew boy must be killed.
Talk about an overreaction.
Yeah.
Seriously, it makes you wonder about what was going on in Pharaoh's head.
Yeah, no kidding. And actually, the surah gives us some insights into his psychology. It describes him as this guy who exalted himself, claimed to be your Lord Most High.
Whoa. So it's not even just about political power at this point.
No.
It's more like he's got this deep-seated arrogance, this total refusal to acknowledge anything or anyone higher than himself.
Right. He's basically setting himself up as a god.
Which, spoiler alert, never ends well.
Nope.
So, okay, where does baby Moses fit into all this?
So his mother, she's desperate, right? She wants to save her child. So she makes this unbelievably courageous decision.
Okay.
Puts him in a basket, sets him adrift on the Nile River.
What?
Yeah. Just trusting that God will protect him.
Wow. I can't even imagine the strength it must have taken to do that, to just entrust her baby to a river. It's just, wow.
I know, it's incredible. It's a true testament to her faith. And this is where things get really interesting. The basket with baby Moses, it floats right into Pharaoh's palace.
No way.
Yeah. And guess who finds him?
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh's wife.
Oh my gosh.
She's moved by compassion. She pleads with Pharaoh to let her adopt the child, and he agrees.
So he has no idea.
No idea. He ends up raising the very person destined to challenge his reign.
Oh, the irony. So Moses, the future liberator of the Israelites, grows up in the lap of luxury, surrounded by the very system he's going to, dismantle.
That's exactly it.
It's like a ticking time bomb.
It really is. And this whole situation perfectly highlights one of the surah's key themes, this idea of divine intervention.
Okay.
Even when things seem totally hopeless, God is working behind the scenes, orchestrating events in ways we might not understand.
So you're saying that even Pharaoh, as arrogant as he is somehow part of God's plan?
It's a pretty mind-blowing concept, right?
Totally. So what about Moses? Does he ever find out about his real family?
The surah doesn't go into much detail about his childhood, but we do know that as an adult, the surah says, Moses reached maturity and was well established.
He was basically integrated into Egyptian society.
Right, but then comes this one pivotal moment, and everything changes.
Okay, I'm hooked. What happens?
Moses, he steps in to break up a fight and ends up accidentally killing a man.
Oh, wow. You don't usually expect a prophet to make that kind of mistake,
I know, right? But the surah shows us that, even prophets, they're human, they make mistakes.
It makes them more relatable, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And it forces Moses to flee Egypt. He leaves behind his life of privilege, and it sets him on this completely new path.
So it's like running away from this crime leads him to his destiny as a prophet.
Exactly.
Okay, so where does he go?
Well, he finds refuge in Midian. He gets married, starts a new life. But it's not just a temporary stop, it's a time of huge personal growth.
Got it.
And in the quiet of the desert, something incredible happens. Moses encounters God at the burning bush.
Wow, the burning bush. So that's where he receives his mission to return to Egypt and confront Pharaoh.
Exactly.
It's amazing how that one event, fleeing from this crime, completely changes the course of his life. It makes you think about how sometimes our biggest challenges can lead us to our true purpose.
That's a really good point.
So what's Moses supposed to do? Just walk up to Pharaoh and say, "Free my people."
It's not that simple. Remember, Moses isn't that confident prince anymore. He's a fugitive with a huge weight on his shoulders. And he actually feels really inadequate for the task.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, going up against Pharaoh is no joke.
He even expresses his doubts to God. He asks God to send his brother Aaron with him for support.
So it's okay to ask for help, even when you're a prophet. I like that. It's kind of reassuring.
It is. It reminds us that none of us have to go through tough times alone. We can lean on each other and God for support.
Okay, so God sends Aaron with Moses. What happens next?
God gives Moses these awesome signs, like he can turn his staff into a snake, and he can bring plagues upon Egypt.
Oh, wow, so that's what those are for.
Yeah, these miracles, they're not just for show, they serve a purpose.
Okay, I was going to say.
They're meant to prove to Pharaoh and his people that Moses isn't messing around. He's acting on God's authority.
So it's like a seal of approval from, the highest authority there is.
Exactly. And it's all about challenging Pharaoh's arrogance and showing that true power comes from God.
Okay, now we're getting to the good part. We've got Moses back in Egypt on a divine mission, armed with miracles, and his brother at his side, and they're about to face off against Pharaoh. This is where things start to get really interesting.
Oh, they definitely do. It's going to be quite a showdown. Pharaoh, as you can imagine, isn't thrilled to see Moses back in Egypt.
Well, yeah, after that whole prophecy thing and Moses being the chosen one and all.
He's dug in, refuses to acknowledge anyone having more power than him.
So it's this ultimate clash of wills. The mighty king versus the prophet chosen by God. The stakes are high. The fate of the Israelites hangs in the balance. I can't wait to hear what happens next. All right, so we're back diving deeper into Surah Al-Qasas and that epic showdown brewing between Moses and Pharaoh. Last time we left off with Moses back in Egypt, ready to confront Pharaoh with, God on his side. But I'm guessing Pharaoh doesn't just roll over, right?
Oh, absolutely not. He's got all these advisors whispering in his ear, telling him Moses is just a rabble-rouser, trying to stir up trouble with some fancy magic tricks.
Okay, but Moses has, actual miracles on his side.
Right, but Pharaoh, he's so blinded by his ego, he can't see the truth. He actually calls in his own magicians, tries to get them to copy Moses's miracles, thinks that'll discredit him in front of everyone.
So it becomes this big public spectacle, a battle of, who's got the better magic.
Exactly. It's a struggle for the hearts and minds of the Egyptians. But here's the thing, Pharaoh's magicians, they can't do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, good luck competing with, the power of God.
They try, but they completely fail. And actually, the surah describes how they're so amazed by what Moses can do that they end up bowing down.
No way.
Right there, in front of everyone, they declare their belief in the God of Moses and Aaron.
Talk about a backfire for Pharaoh. His own guys are turning on him. So how does he react to this very public humiliation?
Well, he does what any rational, any stubborn, power-hungry ruler would do.
Okay.
He doubles down, hardens his heart, cracks down even harder on the Israelites.
Of course he does. It's like the more threatened he feels, the worse he gets. Classic tyrant move.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing this doesn't help his situation much.
Nope, not at all. The surah shows us that even though they're suffering terribly, the Israelites, they find strength in their faith.
Okay.
They believe in God's promise of deliverance. And it reminds us that even in the darkest times, faith can give us that strength to keep going.
It really can. So what about Pharaoh's advisors? Are they just letting him go off the rails like this?
The surah actually talks about them, says they filled him with empty hopes.
Oh, so they're just telling him what he wants to hear.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that sometimes the people in power surround themselves with yes men, people who tell them what they want to hear, even if it's leading them down a dangerous path.
It's a lesson that's as relevant today as it was back then. So Pharaoh's not budging. The Israelites are suffering more than ever. Does God finally step in at this point? I mean, enough is enough, right?
He does, but it's not like an instant fix. God tells Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt under the cover of night.
Okay, so this is the Exodus we're talking about here. One of the most famous events in, religious history. And I think everyone knows what comes next, right?
You mean the parting of the Red Sea?
The one and only.
Yeah. It's one of those images that just stays with you, that awesome display of divine power.
Absolutely. So how does the surah describe that moment?
It says that Moses, following God's command, he strikes the sea with his staff, the waters part, creating a dry path for the Israelites to escape.
Wow.
But Pharaoh and his army, they're so fixated on capturing the Israelites. Blinded by their rage, they follow them right into the sea.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine? Fleeing through the parted waters with the waves towering on either side and looking back to see Pharaoh's army coming after you. Terrifying.
It must have been. And then God commands the waters to return to their natural state. Pharaoh and his army are swept away.
Wow, what a powerful image of justice, Like, Pharaoh's reign of terror is finally over.
Right, and for the Israelites, it's the start of something new.
So is this where everyone lives happily ever after? I mean, their journey's not over yet, is it?
No, not quite. They still have a long way to go, a tough journey through the wilderness ahead of them. They'll face all sorts of trials and tribulations along the way. And, it's not just a physical journey, it's a spiritual one, too.
Makes sense. After all that, they'd probably need some time to process.
And even though they saw these miracles, they still struggle with their faith sometimes, complain, miss the comforts they had back in Egypt, even question Moses' leadership.
I mean, who hasn't been there, right? Even after experiencing something amazing, it's easy to fall back into old habits like doubt and fear.
Exactly. We're all human. But the surah uses these struggles to teach us about patience, perseverance, and, most importantly, unwavering trust in God, no matter how hard things get.
So it's all about holding on to that faith, even when you're tested.
Right. And that's where the story of Qarun comes in.
Oh, right. You mentioned him earlier. He was that super rich guy from Moses' tribe.
He was, but he's straight from the right path, let's just say.
And his story kind of serves as a contrast to the Israelites, right?
Exactly. Qarun, he had it all, but he wasn't content. He let his wealth corrupt him.
Okay, so we're back. And Qarun, he was super wealthy, but he kind of went down the wrong path, right?
He did. He had all this wealth, but instead of, using it for good, he just hoarded it, showed it off, became arrogant.
It's like he represents that danger of wealth.
Yeah.
How it can really corrupt you if you're not careful. Like we see it even today, right? People with so much money, they lose sight of what's really important.
Absolutely. It's a timeless problem. And that's why Qarun's story is so powerful. It's a reminder that true wealth, it doesn't come from how much you own. It comes from your connection to God.
Okay.
It's about righteousness, compassion for others. That's what really matters.
So what happens to Qarun? Does he realize the error of his ways?
The surah says that even though Moses warned him, Qarun just wouldn't listen, kept flaunting his wealth, mocking those who followed God.
So he didn't exactly learn his lesson?
Nope. And because of that, God caused the earth to swallow him up, him and all his treasures.
Wow. Talk about a dramatic ending. It's a pretty clear message. You can't take it with you.
You can't. The surah really emphasizes that our time on earth is temporary. Our legacy, it's not about what we accumulate, it's about how we live our lives, how we use what we have to make a positive difference.
So we've got the Israelites struggling to keep their faith in the wilderness. And we've got Qarun, facing the consequences of his greed. And it really highlights that tension between choosing faith over worldly temptations. But there's something I've been thinking about. You mentioned earlier that God chooses who he guides, but then we also have free will. So how does that work?
It's a question people have been wrestling with for, forever. The surah doesn't give a simple answer, but it suggests that even though God has ultimate knowledge, we still have the power to choose, and we have to face the consequences of our choices.
Okay, so it's not one or the other, it's both.
Exactly. Think of it like this. God creates the possibilities, but we get to decide how we move through the world. We can choose to align ourselves with God's will, or, like Qarun, follow our own desires. And sometimes that leads us down a dangerous path.
So it's like that saying, pray as if everything depends on God, but work as if everything depends on you.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. It's about that balance between divine guidance and human effort. The surah tells us to strive for righteousness, knowing that our choices matter.
It makes me think about all the problems we see today. Injustice, inequality, conflict. Sometimes it feels like we're living in Pharaoh's Egypt all over again. So what can we learn from the story of Moses that can help us deal with all of this?
It's a reminder that the fight against oppression, it never ends. But even when things seem impossible, faith and courage, they can win out. The Israelites, they suffered for years, but their faith in God and their fight for justice, it led them to freedom.
So even when things are tough, we shouldn't give up.
Never. Remember, Moses was just one man, but with faith and God's guidance, he stood up to an entire empire. The surah encourages us to be like Moses, to speak out against injustice, fight for what's right. We can all help create a better world.
It's a powerful message, inspiring, and, a little daunting too.
It is. We all have a part to play. And that's what I love about Surah Al-Qasas. It's not just an ancient story. It's a guide for how to live a good, ethical life, full of wisdom and inspiration that we can use even today.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot in this deep dive into Surah Al-Qasas. We've talked about Moses' birth, the Exodus, Pharaoh's tyranny, Karun's greed, explored all the characters and the lessons we can take away from them. But as you said, this is just the beginning. What's one thing you'd want our listener to think about as they continue to reflect on Surah Al-Qasas?
I'd ask them to think about their own journey of faith. What are the pharaohs in their lives, those obstacles, the injustices they face? And how can they, like Moses, use their faith and courage to overcome them, to make the world a better place?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Surah Al-Qasas. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this episode has inspired you to learn more about this incredible chapter of the Quran.